Hello, and welcome back to the AusCannaPodcast. I'm your host, Christina McMullen, and today we're heading across the globe to Malta, where some groundbreaking moves are reshaping the future of cannabis. And at the heart of it all is today's guest, Dr. J.C. Scicluna. Dr. Scicluna is a medical doctor, clinical researcher, and cannabis educator who didn't just watch history unfold, he helped write it. As one of the key architects behind Malta's cannabis legislation, he played a central role in making it the first EU country to legally regulate adult use cannabis. We kick things off with some rapid-fire, fun questions to get to know the man behind the medicine, and then dive deep into a powerful conversation about people, progress, and the global cannabis landscape. From clinic floors to courtrooms to stigma to science, this episode covers it all. Whether you're deep in the industry or just curious about how change really happens, this episode's for you. So let's get into it. Here's my chat with Dr. Scicluna. Okay, are you ready?
All set.
What's the first thing you do when you wake up?
Well, I get up, I have a glass of water, I brush my teeth, and I say my affirmations in the mirror.
I like it. Are you a sweet or savory breakfast type of person?
Definitely savory.
What's a movie you've watched more than 5 times?
Lord of the Rings.
Which one? Like the whole trilogy or just
The whole trilogy.
That's a lot of movie watching. What's your hidden talent?
I am a guitar player.
Ooh, this goes very well into my listener submitted question. Daniel from St. Kilda in Victoria wants to know, would you rather have the ability to speak every language or play every instrument?
That is such a difficult question. I speak a few languages. I love languages. Wow, that's really tricky. But it would have to be every instrument.
Yeah, it's a tough call. I think I'd go with the languages. But I don't have a reason why, because I don't play an instrument, so maybe I'm missing out on something. Do you prefer books or podcasts?
I'm old school. I prefer books.
What's a hobby you wish you had more time for?
Well, I love football, and I used to love doing, five-a-side football games with friends. Don't have any more time for that, but I wish I had more time.
What's your guilty pleasure snack?
Chocolate bar.
I like it because it goes into the next question. Would you rather give up chocolate or cheese forever?
Oh no. I don't think I can give up cheese. It will have to be chocolate, but it will hurt.
Me too. I'm a big cheese fan. What's your favorite cheese?
Brie.
I like it. I like smoked cheeses, so I'm not too picky if it's like a smoked cheddar or, again, a smoked brie or whatever. I like a smoked cheese. There's something, I don't know. I'm a big smoked.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What's your favorite cannabis related myth to debunk?
There are a few, so I had to think about it for a second. But I think my all-time number one is that CBD is an ultimate product which cures everything, a cure-all.
What's one local dish from Malta that everyone should try?
Ooh, there are so many. I think it will have to be our street food, the pastizzi, which are cheesecakes. There are two varieties. One is made of with peas, so it's like salty peas, and the other is made with ricotta. They're both excellent. You find them everywhere, super cheap. So it's like I think 30, 40 cents each, and they're delightful. And two will fill you up very well.
They sound delicious, especially the one made with ricotta. Yum. What's your dream car?
Um, I'm not a big car guy, so I don't think I dream in terms of cars much. But I do, Ferraris are so spectacular, and I think it would have to be, um, yeah, I guess one of the Ferrari range. I'm not even sure, but all of them are so spectacular as cars.
Would you rather develop the perfect medical cultivar or the perfect recreational cultivar?
I I don't think there's such a thing as the perfect recreational cultivar because everyone, has different tastes. I think the perfect medical cultivar for a specific group of patients for a specific condition, yeah, I'd take that one.
Last question. What's your go-to order when you go to a restaurant?
Hmm. I love going for the garlic bread in the beginning, so it's my typical starter. Um, but then I love a good plate of pasta. Pasta all day. Pizza, pasta, e basta, as they say in Italy.
I used to get in trouble as a kid, like when we would go out to restaurants and stuff, because I would fill up on bread rolls and stuff. And my parents would be like, "We don't know why we take you out for dinner. We could just make bread for you at home." Mm. But I'm with you, a good garlic bread with some cheese on it.
Perfect.
Yeah, that hits the spot for sure. Okay, so Dr. Scicluna, for the listeners who don't know anything about you, do you mind giving us a brief introduction?
Right. So, I am a medical doctor by profession. I've always been very passionate about cannabis, the cannabis plant. I really got into cannabis not from the industry point of view, from the activist and activism point of view. So in the later years, when I was at university, when I was at medical school, there was a lot of push towards allowing cannabis medicine in Malta, and we got that legislation done. Um, so since then. I was drawn more and more into the science, more and more into seeing patients doing better when trying this plant for their medical ailments. So I just got so interested in it, and I kept on doing some more academia, did some studies, and I launched a clinic back home in Malta, which was a cannabis specialist clinic. And since then, I was drawn firmly into the industry. So I noticed that cannabis wasn't just something happening on my tiny island of Malta, but it was really a phenomenon, and the changes in regulations was a phenomenon which was happening around me. And I decided to go headfirst into the industry. And really, it started with me going around and trying to provide value in any ways that I could, which eventually became me being a global cannabis consultant. And I particularly help people in the industry with medical affairs, scientific affairs, and also later on global business development. So I've been traveling for the last number of years. I've been all over the world, really. Currently in New Zealand, but I've also been all around Europe, South America, North America, really learning about how cannabis medicine, how recreational and adult use cannabis is deeply ingrained in so many different cultures. And I try to take whatever I learn and give those insights to my clients. And really, I try always work within a very particular set of values, which are really helping people in the medical sense, and also helping people also within my work in adult use, because I believe that drug policy and the way that we look at people who use certain substances needs to be changed. The outlook needs to be changed. So for me, it's not simply helping people in a medical sense, but also helping people in a social sense. And that's what I have been doing now for the last few years, and I intend to keep on doing it and to keep on learning more and keep on making sure that I can pass on that learning and insights to my clients and to the patients and customers that they have.
I love it. I don't even know where to start because I feel like you're kind of a jack of all trades with many, many hats there. But I am gonna circle back all the way to the beginning to drafting some legislation because I'm gonna you and I actually first met there at the end of February at United in Compassion.
That's right.
The wonderful Melanie Wenzel gave us a little introduction there. And as soon as she introduced us and you started talking about how you were involved in Malta's legislation, I like got so excited I had to cut you off. And I was like, no, 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 we have to change subjects. I know I want to bring you on the podcast and I want to talk to you about it. So, um, like I said, there's lots of things to talk about for this episode, but I would like to start there. You said that it started with a bit of activism in university. Like, kind of what? Take me back to that. What started that?
So, w- in the context of Malta, there were two different forms of legislation. So first on, we had the medical legislation in 2018, which basically gave any medical doctor in Malta the ability to prescribe a cannabinoid containing medical product, and that gave the first legal access to the public to be able to go to the pharmacy, I mean, go to their doctor, get a prescription, get a permit from the ministry, from the Ministry of Health, to carry cannabis as a narcotic, and this was I think a very good first start. Obviously, from then on, I became involved as a prescriber, and starting off as a prescriber in Malta, that is it was tricky. It was tricky because there was still a lot of stigma. So something I always try and say is just because there's legislation doesn't mean there is no stigma to this day. After all that legislation having adult use, and we have home grow and licensed cannabis non-for-profit clubs and cannabis in the pharmacy for quite a few years now, and there's still stigma. But definitely back in those days, the stigma was very, very strong. So I felt that I couldn't just be a prescribing doctor and see my patients, but I really needs to open up my clinic and educate not just patients, but also doctors and society at large. So it really started from that of me being more and more public with talking about cannabis and really making sure that people know about this legislation because um, when I think about it, part of that 2018 legislation, part of what I thought was weird about it was that it was so significant for patients. And yet, because it can be a bit, from a political sense, a bit controversial, um, there wasn't a lot of hype around it. So the government sort of passed that legislation, but didn't quite tell the public or inform the public so much about it. So there were cases of patients who may have benefited from this medicine, but they just didn't know about it. So it started from there of me becoming more and more vocal. And that was picked up. Obviously, by then I had already been consulting for some time as well. So it was picked up by the starting members of the new authority for the responsible use of cannabis in Malta, which was ARC. And they had approached me basically to join the team, and it was a very interesting time to join the team because it was at a time where the authority had a mandate from the government. They're like, okay, we're passing this legislation, but this legislation now needs sub-legislation, directives of, okay, we want adult use cannabis, but how is it going to work? What framework are we going to have? And it was very interesting because we were the first framework in the European Union. So that means in the context of Europe and specifically the context of the EU, we really didn't have any guide to follow. There were um, uh, some guides that we could take, some pages from Canada, from Uruguay, but obviously because cannabis is so ingrained in the culture and cannabis use is so ingrained in the culture, we really needed to write a lot of things from scratch because what maybe worked in Canada or didn't work in Canada and Uruguay doesn't mean it was going to work or not work in the context of Maltese culture and in the context of what the activist groups in Malta were pushing for. So it was a really interesting time for me. So I decided to go for it. And from my part, I was part of the overall discussions and the unveiling of the directives, but I took a more leading role in the technical and scientific directives. So those are the specifications of how the product needs to be grown by the non-for-profits. So the non-for-profits in Malta get to have a license, and the license is dual, both for production of the cannabis as well as the dispensing of cannabis. Um, and one of the initial challenges was, okay, we the mandate was we want to have a standard which is safe and a standard where the public can have access to cannabis which is made with public health in mind. That means cannabis which, unlike in the illicit market, is very well controlled. At the same time, we already knew that there was an existing medical cannabis legislation, an existing pharmaceutical industry around cannabis. And one of the things we wanted to do was we didn't want to raise the bar too high because for this legislation, it wasn't around allowing pharmaceutical companies to come in and produce the cannabis. We wanted to have community. So the cornerstone of the Maltese legislation was around having communities and empowering communities to use cannabis safely within the community. So these are people who perhaps they don't come from pharma, they don't have really deep pockets to have huge facilities. So we wanted to come up with legislation which, on the one part, ensures that it's a safe, clean product, but on the other part ensures that it's accessible to communities who just want to grow in the community and reduce the harm and take care of each other as they use the cannabis. So that was the challenge we had set out in front of us, and I think we did quite well. There are now more than 12. I'm trying to guess the exact number, but definitely more than 12 active um, um, non-for-profit cannabis associations in Malta. And whenever I go back and I either visit one or I speak to friends and they tell me, it's been so easy for me to just go and get clean product. And I had, many friends of mine from university tell me, I was always so afraid of maybe getting in touch with the illicit market, needing to go into maybe a shady alleyway to get my product, or um, uh, perhaps being hard done by someone in the illicit market. And now I can just go to a nice dispensary. I can look at a menu. I can look at the product before. I can get access to clean product. So I think I'm quite happy that we did that quite well. There were obviously a lot of things which still have to be improved. So I always say that legislation is a very live thing. It's you need to start somewhere, but you need to continuously improve. But between the not-for-profit associations and the communities that are being built in that regard, and the home grow legislation, which was, I think, maybe even more popular, I think we achieved in giving Maltese society a way to be able to use cannabis, whether it is for responsible adult use or for medical use. We've given people options.
There's so much that I love about all of that. And again, there's so many things I could ask, like so many questions, so many little things I want to know. Um, wow, do like, straight up, as you're sitting there helping be a part of this, do you realize that you're this trailblazer in the European Union? Because you said it. Yeah, you can pull from places like Canada and Uruguay, but there was nothing there in the EU. You guys were the first country that was like, okay, we're gonna do this. And like you're saying, many layers to that legislation between the pharmaceutical and medical side, and then the clubs that you're talking about where you're building the community, and then to take it to another level, and you're even talking about home grow, which I know here in Australia there's a lot of people that would love to be able to grow their own. Like, wow, I'm just wow. I am. I'm gonna say wow. Like, did you know that, like, as you're doing all of this, do you realize that you, like you said yourself, legislation is a living, breathing thing, but you're trailblazing, man.
It was really exciting. So whilst I was doing it, obviously because it was so busy and the timelines you get from government are always very, very tight. So decisions are made, once Parliament makes a decision, then you get a mandate. Okay, you need to come up with this really, really quickly. And obviously the public is always waiting and expecting, and you have to not just deal with how you're feeling, but you also have to make sure that it comes out in a way and you communicate it in a way which is clean, which is professional, and you need to be a little bit media savvy as well, because obviously the media looks at what is happening, rightly so, and gives a very strong critique. So you really need to be open to that criticism and to be able to react to it in the best way possible. I always try and keep focused. There's so much left to learn, and I still learn even now when I see other countries doing their legislation. I do take some pride in the fact that huge countries like Germany are also introducing home grow concepts and things that we released in Malta. There are some changes as well, so it's interesting to see that other countries have really stood up and took note of what happened in Malta, despite the size. It's a tiny island, but people looked at what we did, and they improved upon it. And I like that. I like the fact that, as we said, legislation is a living thing, and there are other nations now looking at our work, breaking it down piece by piece and improving upon it. I think that not just on a national sense, but also on the international sense, we really gave some momentum to changing the face of European cannabis. And yeah, I'll also say I'm proud of that.
Yeah, man. Like I said, when Melanie introduced us, I was a little starstruck. I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. Like what you've done, and again, where things are going, and I love it. Take me back to when you were running your clinic and you were saying that, um, yeah, okay, so you have this legislation, it's been passed, but the public doesn't really know about it, and there's a stigma. Like, how did your patients find you?
So it's always a bit tricky because of how the ethics around sort of advertising yourself as a clinician, whatever type of clinician you are, but you aren't really allowed to sort of do ads on a bus or something for people to come visit you, but you do want people to know that you're there if they need you. So for me, it was around two different things. First of all, advocating for patients with doctors, and also speaking to doctors, because medicine is not in a vacuum, and you need to consider so many aspects of a patient. So a patient doesn't ever just need a doctor specializing in cannabis. Normally, this patient would have needed and gone to a lot of different doctors. And it's really about changing how the medical community looks at cannabis. Because in that way, if enough doctors are knowledgeable, perhaps not knowledgeable enough to prescribe, perhaps they don't feel they're comfortable enough to prescribe, but they're knowledgeable enough to say, okay, this patient might benefit from cannabis. I don't have the the knowledge per se, but I'll refer. So building that referral base, I think, was between clinicians by, attending, attending different clinical fora, academic fora, and just making it known out there, that you're a clinician, that you have clinics where patients can talk to you about options in medicinal cannabis, and for those clinicians to trust you, to see that you are serious and you are clinically oriented. I think that was the first important step. And then I also really tried as much as possible to open myself to patients. So there were some open days that we had at the clinic where really it was just about learning more about the plant and learning more about the legislation and learning more about how people with different conditions can possibly benefit from the plant. So really trying to have education, and whether or not, hopefully not, hopefully no one ever needs any medication, right? But having that knowledge out there, that perhaps it's not you or it might be a friend, just to know that this service is there. That was, I think, two very useful ways of how we got people to know that there was a service that was available. Um, of course, I think a lot is also about battling stigma. In both those situations, it's about battling stigma, both from the public, but also battling stigma in the medical community. I think that was one of the toughest challenges starting off. And um, it, because in some instances, it's a case of, having doctors who are very open, very receptive, and just want to know more. In some cases, you have doctors pushing back, and doctors saying, listen, that you shouldn't be doing this, or even taking action, and really challenging you in a way which, I mean, some of it is scientific and clinic based, and I'm happy with that. I think we need to have more of these discussions, and I'm always a skeptic. Unfortunately, some of it is not that. So some of it was a lot around, building around the stigmas, and a lot of, you know, some unpleasant things, some character assassinations and things like that, which unfortunately are part and parcel of this world, and were something that I have to deal with, not just for myself, but also for my patients.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like I do understand why the medical community wants clinical research to back it up, right? I do. I respect that. But at the same time, I'm like, there are big gaps in cannabis science, because getting that funded and approved to do it is such a hurdle. How would cannabis research compared to where you are, compared to what it is here in Australia? Because I know I've got another podcast coming up with two gentlemen who just did a study, and they were talking about what a struggle it was to kind of, get it funded and all of that sort of thing. Is Europe in general just kind of, are they more open to clinical research and study around cannabis, so that way you can take those studies back to the doctors and have those conversations?
My experience around the world is that it's difficult everywhere, and there's a lot of difficulties, um, before we can really have enough studies, enough that we would want, because first of all, there's a need of a lot of studies, because cannabis is used for so many different indications. It can be useful for so many things anecdotally. That means there's a long, shopping list of things that we need to prove benefit for. And you mentioned, secondly, there's funding, which is always an issue, especially where, um, and this is really something I learned the more I dealt with the pharma industry. In pharma, there's a lot of risk mitigation, which goes in place before a pharma company decides to drop a significant amount of money towards research. And especially for a plant which it's a plant, it's a natural product. So there are some difficulties in getting the patents, that the pharma industry will sort of say, okay, we're spending this much money, but the patent will give us a certain amount of years of exclusivity where we can get our money back that we, forked out for research. Um, there are some problems in doing that with a natural plant. So the economics of doing research in cannabis are quite difficult. And I mean, obviously we live in this world of of economics, and you can understand that from that part. So the strongest funders of clinical research haven't so far. When you look at the big pharmaceutical companies, most of them at least, they've been very risk averse there. I mean, the few that did actually got quite good results, but I think many of them are still waiting to sort of enter at a better time. Finally, this sort of puts a lot of pressure on the non-pharma research, and also of academic research. So people doing masters, PhDs, centers at university, but we go back to the problem of stigma. So anyone who has been doing research at any level, masters, PhD level, it's rigorous, it's difficult. A lot of people are also balancing that with a full-time job and family commitments. And the least thing you want is for there to be more complications for you to get your master's or your PhD. So actually a lot of tutors, and they do this out of really trying to care for their students, they will try and push students away from topics which could give them more problems, topics which could be difficult to pass through an IRB, an ethics board, for example. So it makes it less, even though there's a lot of interest from students. And I remember I was doing some work, helping some undergrads with a project, and I was helping the ones who chose for their, it was a second year project, and they were doing second year medicine, and they were the ones who, there were so many that wanted to choose topics in cannabis and psychedelics, and there's a lot of interest from the youth to study these topics, but um, a lot of them, as we're talking about what kind of research they would do, they were getting quite frustrated in how watered down their ambitions needed to be for them to be able to actually finalize the study and achieve it without having to go through huge either economic lengths or internal political lengths to get it approved by university. So all these reasons are the reasons that we don't have the studies. And it's a bit like one of those catch-22s where you have some conservatives and skeptics saying we need more evidence, but at the same time, unfortunately, they tend to be, and maybe there's a bit of a generational issue here, which needs time to come to pass. But unfortunately, many of the strongest skeptics are the ones who are in very important positions on ethics boards, so they have a lot of say in the evidence that can actually be generated. So we're kind of stuck in that situation, and from my experience, I think it's the same all over. And especially when I talk to other researchers, I've had the benefit of being able to speak to some amazing people doing amazing work all over the world, and it seems to be the same situation all over.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, yeah, that's very astute of you, sir, because that's probably nailing it. Kind of some of the people that would be in control of some of those funds to let those things happen are a little bit more conservative, shall we say. Um, if you could, I guess this is kind of like a double question here, in the sense that w- if you could do your own cannabis study, kind of what would you focus on in the sense that you're trying to, get the data to go back to be able to change the policy and then change the perception? Is there like a study that you would do that would be able to give that data back?
I think there's just so much work that needs to be done. From from my perspective, there needs to be more confirmation on both the therapeutic side and the adverse effects. So you sometimes have a very polarized world in cannabis where you have again some people who almost despite any evidence will keep shooting it down, and then you have the other end of the spectrum where you have people sort of pushing I spoke about CBD earlier. I don't mean to single it out, but it's just there's a whole industry dedicated to CBD where if you actually have to look at the research, there's so much more research on the therapeutic values of THC rather than CBD. But I think in general, it's important to focus research on topics like cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, on psychosis, on the addiction sides, because the more we know about these topics, the safer we can make cannabis. So I I don't quite agree with cannabis proponents who look at the plant as this, perfect specimen given to us, which we need to keep in its current form and use. I think that much like the rest of the natural world, we've been given a lot of gifts, but we've also been given the gift of being able to um, fix things and improve things and make a cannabis 2.0. And the more we know about both therapeutic indications and the adverse effects, the more we can achieve, can start growing cannabis, which is better, more efficacious, and safer as well. I'm not sure I'd know I'd be able to pinpoint one study I would do, but I was recently listening to an amazing talk by Professor Didi Mary about a few of studies he's been doing in his lab. And one that really struck me was around the heterogeneity and complexity of cannabis. And he was looking at this was it wasn't clinical, it was preclinical. He was looking at cell lines. Um, and he took a lot of different samples of cannabis. And one thing that he kept common or constant was the THC. So the THC was kept the same, and he saw what these different sort of cannabis specimens were doing to these cell lines. And these were cancer cell lines. So he was basically getting some cancer cells and seeing what THC was doing, what the specimens were doing to that cancer. And it was so different, and all of them had the same amount of THC, but they were actually being able to affect the cancer cells in such a different way. So I think one study I would want to do is because to continue working on that complexity of the cannabis plant and the different molecules, because we are a bit narrow-minded in thinking that it's going to be the THC, the CBD, or the CBN, or whatever cannabinoid which is going to do the business for us. But I think in that way we are blindsiding ourselves to all the other components of the cannabis plant, many of which we don't even know or haven't even placed a name for. So there's so much more potential to be had.
I was going to say, are there any specific cannabinoids or maybe terpenes or flavonoids that are kind of on your radar that you think deserve more attention?
I've looked at a lot of research around the varins, and they seem to be really interesting. I've not seen a lot of clinical stuff, so most of the papers I've read were preclinical. But I think some of the actions of the varins, so that's THCV, CBDV, they just seem to be so interesting, and they seem to offer a different kind of therapeutic potential to what THC and CBD bring to the game. And this is what I meant earlier about, cannabis being so widespread, so widespread. So if we're really going to study this plant and try and study all the molecules of this plant and what they can do, I think that in a way will lead us, in a medical sense, definitely to achieve the perfect cultivars for different conditions much easier than just to try and throw different percentages of THC at the problem. And I think probably the same can be said for the adult use, especially, I mean, there's been so much work around, different genetics and different terpenes and different experiences. I think there's a lot of complexity which we still have to unravel before we can achieve a level of, your perfect cannabis strains for X, Y, Z indications or moods.
I agree with you. I do think, though, that if people took more time to write down kind of notes about how certain things made them feel, that they would be able to improve their therapeutic outcomes if they paid attention again, because there are patterns. If you're not paying attention to the patterns, you don't notice them.
Exactly. I think real world data is so there's so much potential there, which we're not maybe giving enough importance to. I think it's underrated. And definitely from a medical side, there's this hierarchy of evidence, and we always look at randomized controlled trials because we want to make sure that what we think is having the effect is really having the effect, and there are no confounding variables, different things which might be changing what you're seeing in your results. Um, but especially now with the advent of big data and artificial intelligence, there's so much more that can be extracted from each and every one of ours day-to-day um, day-to-day use of the plant that I think the potential here for us to be able to draw important conclusions is here, and it wasn't here before because it's a case of needing to have the shovel to be able to dig this hole. And now I think with the tools we have from a maths and statistics and computer point of view, now there's a lot more we can do. There's a lot more that each and every one of us can do, especially if you're keeping track. And then that's something I recommend to everyone, whether you're using cannabis medically or you're using it, as adult use. You should definitely be keeping track and seeing what works for you, what doesn't work for you, because it will just enhance your overall experience, and you'll be able to really, find the right flavor for the right moment.
No, I couldn't agree more with that. It's so true. It's so true. Um, do you think pharmaceutical companies will really play a role in the cannabis market moving forward? Or do you think that they'll kind of, I don't want to say fade out, like if we move towards that adult use market, but do you think they're really going to affect the actual cannabis market going down, say 10 years from now, 20 years from now?
I think they're keeping close watch. Um, the Again, for the pharmaceutical industry, there are so many calculations, and these are economical. These are business calculations around what is the right time to enter based on the knowledge that we know, based on the data that we don't have that we want. And it might sound a little, a little funny to say it this way, but I think a good strategy would be that they're waiting out a lot of cannabis startups, cannabis pharma startups who unfortunately are bleeding their own blood to get answers to questions. And pharma's just there at the background seeing how things play out. And as we all know, they have the resources to be able to move very, very quickly when there is either a scientific or a regulatory breakthrough. Which of those comes first? Not sure. I would bet it would be a regulatory breakthrough. Um, Especially, looking at the UN and the INCB, and the International Narcotics Control Board, which is an arm of the UN to control the flow of narcotic drugs from one country to another. I was reading the reports of the last conference in Vienna, and I do believe that probably there will be a significant regulatory change, which will kind of change the appetite for pharmaceutical companies, and not just, but on the medical side, definitely pharmaceutical companies will be seeing these changes, and that will affect their appetite. And there will be a moment where um, they 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 will see that there's enough potential and that's greater than the risks, and that will be the moment where I think there will be a lot of movement very quickly in cannabinoid therapeutics and also in adult use cannabis. It's just waiting for that moment, unfortunately.
Do you think we're going to see that in like maybe potentially the next decade? Do you think the EU is really kind of evolving fast enough that we'll see some major, like maybe some more countries moving towards adult use? Like should we be keeping our eyes on the EU?
Well, I think what the EU, it's part of the equation. I think this is really something global. With regards to the EU, there's a lot of different things happening. So the EU has there is something known as a European Citizens Initiative, where citizens can group together and create an initiative, and it's a bit more than a petition, but in essentially collect a number of signatures, and the number is around 1 million, and this can then be taken to the EU, and have the look at the laws again, and they'll say, listen, is there something to be changed? So from the EU's perspective, it's very strong in the sense that it gives citizens the power to change things if there's enough support behind it. So currently there's another initiative. It's not around cannabis, but it's around psychedelics. It's called psychedelicare.eu, and it's pushing for allowing the use of psychedelic assisted therapy to happen in the EU. And obviously, it's very good in that sense to allow these things, because this is direct, the voice of the people, and the shifting beliefs, the shifting zeitgeist of the people will be able to push an entity as big as the EU in those directions. But with regards to cannabis, I think, and with regards to a lot of substances which are currently classified as, recreational drugs, narcotics, I think it needs to be the UN, and particularly the INCB, the drug, the Narcotics Control Board, which makes a move. What will be interesting, so in the most interesting point I found from the last conference, last convention, which took place a few weeks ago, is that for the first time in a long time, the UN is actually starting, the INCB is actually starting an internal board to look at drug control, and to basically go back to the drug control mechanisms of the world and say, okay, something's not working, let's revisit things. And it might not sound like much, but when you consider that, a lot of the proponents and a lot of activists have been pushing for this, prior to 2016, it's actually quite huge. And what makes it even more important is that, unlike previously, it's not the activists or externals who are pushing this into the INCB. It's the INCB itself which is launching an internal review of things. And although it's not, if you had to read the documents that it released, it's not super explicit, but it is being alluded to, that in common words, saying, okay, clearly we're not reaching our targets for the drug problem, the war on drugs, so to say. Let's go back and see things. And for me, it's really exciting, because it's not just about cannabis. It's about other drugs in general. So I believe, I stand to be corrected, but I believe that this resolution was actually pushed by Colombia. And one of the speeches made by the delegation is that, we as a country, we've been hit by the war on drugs, as at least as much as any other country, and there needs to be a change in the way that we look at drugs, and how we deal with them, how we control them, so that we reduce the harms, and if there are benefits, to make sure we take out those benefits. And I think that's an exciting time. It's an exciting time because not just in cannabis, but in all other drugs, the way we control them, and the way we set our policies, it needs to be something which will allow these substances, which can be tricky, which can be dangerous, but in a way where we reduce the harm and try and push as much as possible the benefit. So it's an interesting time, definitely, to be in. I wouldn't slap a timeline on it, but I would say the next 5 years will definitely be very interesting.
That's what you just said there about the EU, about them doing a little bit more internal stuff. Not the EU, sorry. The I just went blank.
UN, the INCB.
Yeah, how they're stepping up, realizing, you know what, there's some areas of opportunities here, and that we need to look at that internally. You're right, as an outsider looking in, that doesn't seem like a lot, but any organization that can step up and say, "Hey, we kind of missed the target on what we were trying to do. We need to look at that again." That is a massive thing to do. Because I still think we're years away from any type of legalization happening here in Australia. It's as much as I want to say we're 3 to 5 years away, I think we're probably closer to 7-ish, 5 to 7, somewhere in there. Um, but I do think it'll happen eventually.
I think so too. I think so too. And again, the reason that the INC is so important is that what happens there affects the convention, the convention on these narcotics, which is extremely important because this convention is the main referee. It's the main controller of the country's legislation. So going back to Malta, we had to be very careful in the way we legislate for that because we didn't want to be in breach. And actually, we did go to Vienna as a Maltese delegation and need to give an explanation of our legislation and sort of explain how it is not in breach. And you hear a lot about it being non-for-profit, and it's not just Malta, this is across the board, a lot of not-for-profit, a lot of countries saying, oh, we haven't legalized, we've decriminalized. And a lot of these, going around, going around, around the words. And the reason that all this is happening, the reason that countries are doing this are because of these conventions coming from the UN. They have so much weight on the individual country. So that's why it's so important that a body like the INCB is actually, passed a resolution to review what it's doing with different drugs, because once that happens, and if it results in a change in the convention, which allows for more activities to happen, which allows for more research to happen, which allows for commercial markets to happen, without delving into the pro and cons of each one, but any change will have a massive effect on not just cannabis but all of these drugs, and it will have a massive effect in the way the different players in the industry will come in. We talked about pharma. That's when probably I expect big pharma to then say, okay, time is right now for us to make our move. That's when I expect other players in adult use to make, bigger plays. That's when I expect a lot of funding, a lot of investment to flow back into cannabis, because there's life again. There's life again, and there's an opportunity to make businesses which aren't so shackled by the national regulations, which again are governed by those conventions, right? You look at the United States, for example, and you have, state regulation, but then you have a lot of operators in different states which are shutting down because the state regulations are enough for them to enter, but not be sustainable, survive. So all this to say, once those, big conventions have any sorts of change, and even if it's a minor change, across the funnel, it will be such a huge change in the way that in the day-to-day of medical and adult use cannabis.
Do you think there was anything unique to Malta's model that could be applied here in Australia if we were to move towards that more balanced, again, where we still embrace the medical, but we have those social clubs and we have home grow. Is there something that we could take from Malta's model and apply here?
Well, you said it at home grow. I think looking back, home grow is something that empowered a lot of people to be able to have access to the plant. So I think that's a great first step. You do have some people in the industry saying, that it might hurt our profits, it might push people away from the pharmacy, from the dispensary, but from an activism point of view, giving the people power to, grow their own cannabis just like they can grow their own herbs in their garden. I think really as a global society, that's where we want to be. Um, from the, cannabis clubs, from that perspective, I think there the focus should be on not the cannabis itself, but the community. The community, the fact that you have people talking about, yeah, talking together about, okay, what are the next strains that we want to grow? And some people, you might have polls, and then I understand there are some clubs here that actually in Malta that they run polls. They're like, okay, would you like maybe a CBD variety? Would you like that? And you have people talking, and even when you have um, you, you have people consuming together, there's a lot less harm in consuming together than when you're consuming alone. Because again, we said this plant it's not a golden bullet. It's not perfect. There are harms possible, but the harms are so much worse if you're alone and you have no one to sort of tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, are you okay?" Maybe you should put that down, or maybe you should take it easy, or and I actually saw this once. I was in Spain, I was in Barcelona, I was in one of the clubs, and some tourists had come in, and it was their first time, but no one knew, and they ordered a pre-roll. They got the first big pre-roll that they could find. And there were two guys, and one guy took a puff, another guy took a puff. They passed it around another couple of times, and in a minute, one of the guys I saw him I saw him go white and get sweaty, and before you know it, he was on the ground. So he had his blood pressure went down because of the cannabis. Very common, especially if you're taking something very strong and it's your first time. But people were around. I was there, and I'm a medical doctor. I could help out. Other people came to help him, and imagine if this guy just went, picked up his stuff, went back home, didn't feel good, and I don't know, maybe he went to go have a shower or not, just stayed and fell and hurt himself. It could have got so much worse. But the fact that we were there consuming together, the community kept him safe. So for me, I think those are the most important things that Australia should consider: that home grow, that freedom to have cannabis in your backyard, and to build community around cannabis. And I think the community is also a really good way of beating the stigma. Um, I know of some communities in Malta, some cannabis communities in Malta who, even though it's a nonprofit for cannabis, um, I know some who sort of have gotten together and said, okay, we're going to do a nice event and we're going to raise money for a charity for stray dogs, or we're going to raise money for some other important aspect of society, and that's great because it shows that the cannabis community isn't, whatever society might think it is, but they are people from all walks of life who are coming together, who are enjoying the plant, um, and who are also giving back. And I think that element of the cannabis community being a community that gives back not only helps reduce the stigma, but it also, helps create um, that that even bigger community within the whole society. And that's where people will be like walking in the street and you see a cannabis club, and rather than saying, oh, let's cross the road, I don't want to be any close to that, that's up, that's it's part of our community. It's part of who we are as a people. And I think those would be the most important things that I'd love to see in Australia too.
Oh my God. I'm smiling so big and goofy and nodding with you because I'm like, yes, 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 on so many levels. Like, I think one of the things that I miss most about consuming in Canada was that community, in the sense that, I'm hanging out with some girlfriends, we're passing a joint around, we're giggling, we're laughing, we're being goofy, we're having connections. I think, like, in today's society, we're so busy on our phone, we're so busy on our screen, we're like, we've got our headphones in when we're just going out for walks. All these little micro moments to engage with people, we're losing them. And to me, one of the great things about cannabis, even before I acknowledged that it was working for me medicinally, when I was purely just teenage 20s out of control, partying, all of it was always social for me. It was always hanging out with friends, and like what you're saying, like if you did something stupid and you were, again, you were gonna pass out or something, you were with friends and you were still safe, and there was still that community, and there was still that mental well-being. Like, stigma be damned, you were around friends, right? And I feel like we miss out on a lot of that now, and I think that part of our social anxiety and things like that are because we are so disconnected. So for me, I think one of the best things that Australia could do is, if we did move into adult use, is embracing those social clubs, so that way we could get together, we could have a community, we could do things together, we could talk to people, and we could educate. And like you're saying, I don't know, raise funds for the RSPCA, man, and go save some cats and dogs. Like, my big thing is always we're functional members of society, we're contributing members of society, and there shouldn't be a stigma just because I consume a plant.
Absolutely, absolutely that, and it needs to be a full measure, not a half measure. So I mean, I mentioned the clubs in Barcelona, and I love, I love Barcelona. I love the scene there. I think it's the result of so many hard working men and women who have worked in these clubs. But I think one step forward that Malta took was to give these associations, clubs, the legitimacy, the legitimacy for people to feel safe, and to not think that, okay, one day we're just having fun and the next day we're going to be busted. And I think being able to go in a full measure for the government in Australia to say, listen, we're going to really support them, and we want them to flourish. Because one thing that I liked from the discussions that we had in Malta, I still remember the chairperson at the time, Leonid McKay, saying to us all, listen, if the clubs, we want the clubs to flourish. We want them to do well, because if they're not, then we're not doing our job right. Because we're here as a regulator, we're here to support having these communities. So if these communities, we in Malta, part of the culture, there's a very strong band club culture. So in every little town, there's a band club, and we have a village festa, and the band club is centered around playing different instruments in the band for the village feast. And we really saw them as these village band clubs that we want them to succeed. So it's really important to push their success. And this, it might sound like a lot of fluffy words and things that don't mean much, but one simple thing, for example, is to give them that legitimacy. For example, the Maltese associations, they have bank accounts. They have bank accounts, and you go and you can pay with with your credit card. So it gives them, and it gives the members as well that legitimacy that you're not paying in cash. And something I really don't like with how some of the legislation happened is these half measures where, okay, we'll tolerate. And I understand it was okay at the time, to have tolerability like you have, in Barcelona and the Netherlands, but it, it's still it still doesn't achieve what it sets out to achieve. You're still paying in cash. There's still, you're still not sure if you're on the right side of the law, and that's very important for a lot of people to make sure that I want to be on the right side of the law. I don't want to be, I have a very important job. I have, I don't want to risk. I want to be doing these things on the right side of the law, and I think it's so important to give these clubs the legitimacy and the support they need to flourish. Because if they flourish, their members flourish, and thereby the community is flourishing.
Yeah. Do you have any like upcoming tripped over my words there. Do you have any upcoming projects or events that you're working on that you're excited about?
So I'm on this side of the world. I'm based in New Zealand now. And I am looking forward to attending some events. So I've attended UIC in Brisbane, and that's where we met. I'm looking forward now to attend more events in Australia. I'm really looking forward to understanding more. So I'm very, very new to the region. I've just been here since January, and I'm really looking forward to learn about what's happening here. Obviously, it's such an exciting market. It's such an exciting region. It's such a cool region. I love this side of the world. So for me, this is all super exciting. Being at events, meeting people, meeting great people. Sometimes, when people ask me, why have you stayed for so long in the industry? And it wasn't something planned. It started off, being, getting out of clinical medicine, doing it for 6 months, and then it became six more, and then years started going by. And it's really because the people I've met are so amazing. I've met some of the most amazing people in my life in this industry. Um, so for me, really to be here is really exciting, and to see how I can add value. So, uh, based on the experience I've had and how I've helped companies in the past, be it pharmaceutical or pharma-based companies, to build that medical education, to build portals for both their doctors, to build more educational initiatives for patients, to help pharmacists, as well as other parts of the industry where I can be helpful, to connect as much as possible people in the industry here to opportunities they may have in Europe, to opportunities they may have in South America and the States. And for me, this is all super exciting. I'm really here to meet people, to help the industry, to push the industry forward, and this is really what I have planned for this year on my bingo card, and I had been planning it for a long time. But 2025 is definitely the year where I want to get into Australia, and I want to really offer myself to anyone who may need my services, to offer myself, and really to move the needle. I always try and move the needle. So both in Malta and Europe, it was great what achieved there, but that's in the past now, and there's so much more to be done. And for me now, this is the next thing that I really want to work on, is to move the needle in the Australian market.
I love it, sir. I think that you bring a lot to the table. Before I let you go, what would be the key message that you'd like the listeners to walk away with today?
Well, before I do, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's been a real blast talking with you, Christina. I think the key message is to never underestimate what they can do in the industry. So I never thought that I'd be in my apartment on my laptop writing legislation, which became, writing something on my laptop, which became national legislation, and became a sort of continent-wide framework. And I was just there, and I really want people out there to never underestimate the work they're doing in this industry. It's such a young industry, and it needs each and every one of us to put in their ideas, to put in their ambitions, and to put in, um, really imagine the world they want to see tomorrow, and start building it today. So I really just want to encourage anyone who might be still on the fence with, just trying to work in the industry, or maybe they want to be founders, and they have the next great idea in cannabis. I really just want to tell them not to underestimate themselves, to go ahead, to do it, and you could be really a trailblazer. I think, just like you said, Australia is one of the most exciting places to be right now this year in cannabis. So if you're in Australia and you're thinking about getting into the industry, you have this fantastic idea, go ahead and do it. The most important thing is that there are people who can help you. So really, that's my message. Don't underestimate yourselves. If you think that you can be the writer of a better world for all of us cannabis users out there, all of us cannabis enthusiasts and cannabis people, go out there and do it, because this is your time.
I love it, Dr. Scicluna. Go out there and get it. And that's a wrap. A massive thank you to Dr. Scicluna for joining me on the podcast today. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or leave a review. Every little bit helps spread the word and grow this incredible community we're building together. If you're keen to support the show in other ways, you'll find a Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes, where you can grab your very own AusCanna storage container, the Can Go. It's got a writable top so you know what's in there. And if you're a Spilly McGee like me, you'll appreciate the magnetic bottom. It's my go-to travel, smell-proof stash companion, and a great way to support what I do here on the AusCanna podcast. Until we meet again, friends, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to listen. And remember, while you're doubting yourself, others are terrified of your potential.